The air in Gary, Indiana, in the late autumn of 1958, carried the metallic tang of industry, a scent that clung to brick and skin, a constant reminder of the steel mills that breathed life and soot into the city. Inside a modest, two-story house on Jackson Street, a different kind of alchemy was unfolding. On August 29, a new voice entered the world, a faint cry echoing through the cramped rooms, announcing the arrival of Michael Joseph Jackson. He was the seventh of 10 children born to Catherine and Joe Jackson, a family already overflowing with dreams and the harsh realities of working-class life. The house itself was a crucible, perpetually humming with the energy of so many lives crammed into too little space. The walls, thin and prone to carrying sound, absorbed the cacophony of children's laughter, sibling squabbles, and the ever-present rhythm of music. Catherine, a woman of quiet grace and unwavering faith, instilled in her children a love for melody, her voice a gentle counterpoint to the stern presence of her husband, Joe. Joe Jackson was a formidable figure, a man forged in the unforgiving fires of ambition and disappointment. His own dreams of musical stardom, once vibrant, had long since been shelved, replaced by the relentless grind of a crane operator at the local steel mill. But the music never truly died in him, it merely transformed, becoming a fierce, unyielding drive to sculpt his children into the stars he never became. From the earliest age, Michael was a creature of sound and movement. His small body, still gangly and unformed, seemed to vibrate with an innate rhythm. He would watch his older brothers, Jackie, Tito, Jermaine, and Marlon, rehearse in the living room, their youthful voices blending, their steps clumsy but earnest. Joe, a shadowy figure often perched on the edge of a worn armchair, would watch them with an intensity that could curdle milk. His critiques were sharp, his discipline unyielding. A missed note, a fumbled step, a moment of childish distraction, each was met with a glance that could freeze, or worse, the sting of a belt. The air would thicken with unspoken fear, even as the melody continued. For Michael, these early rehearsals were a strange blend of fascination and terror. He yearned to join the swirling vortex of sound, to move with the effortless grace he saw in his imagination, but the fear of his father's disapproval was a cold knot in his stomach. Yet, when he finally did step forward, a tiny figure barely 5 years old, something extraordinary happened. The music seemed to flow through him, not just from him. His voice, high and pure, cut through the room, a beacon of raw, untamed talent. His movements, though childlike, possessed an uncanny precision, an instinctual understanding of the beat. Joe, for all his sternness, recognized it immediately. This wasn't just another child, this was a phenomenon. The Jackson 5, as they were soon to be known, had found their undisputed lead. The years that followed blurred into a relentless cycle of school, rehearsals, and local performances. The Jackson 5 became a fixture in Gary, playing talent shows, nightclubs, and any venue that would have them. The scent of stale beer and cheap perfume mingled with the nervous sweat of young boys chasing a dream. Michael, still a child, bore the brunt of Joe's expectations. He was pushed harder, drilled longer, his every inflection and gesture meticulously refined. Sleep became a luxury, playtime a forgotten concept. His childhood, as most children knew it, was being systematically dismantled, brick by brick, replaced by the unforgiving architecture of stardom. Yet, in those moments on stage, bathed in the dim, smoky lights, a profound joy would erupt within him. The roar of the small crowds, the shared energy with his brothers, the pure, unadulterated act of singing and dancing, it was a brief, intoxicating escape from the pressure, a glimpse of a different kind of freedom. Then came Motown, the move to California, the dazzling lights of Los Angeles, the iconic recording studios. It was a dizzying ascent. Suddenly, the cramped living room in Gary was replaced by professional stages, the local talent shows by national television. The Jackson 5, with Michael's electrifying presence at its heart, exploded onto the scene. I Want You Back, ABC, The Love You Save, hit after hit cascaded from their young voices, capturing the hearts of a nation. The world saw a joyous, effervescent boy, full of infectious energy and a smile that could melt glaciers. What they didn't see was the profound anxiety that simmered beneath the surface, the deep-seated need for approval that still gnawed at him, the suppressed memories of a childhood sacrificed at the altar of ambition. His talent was prodigious, undeniable, but it came at a cost, a silent toll that would echo through the decades. As the 1970s unfolded, the bright, innocent glow of the Jackson 5 began to shift. Michael, no longer a child, felt the stirrings of an artistic independence that chafed against the group's established sound. The Motown machine, while foundational, now felt restrictive, a cage of expectation. He yearned to explore, to create, to push beyond the boundaries of bubblegum pop. This yearning found its voice in 1979 with Off the Wall. It was a seismic shift, a declaration of intent. The album pulsated with a sophisticated blend of funk, disco, and R&B, showcasing a Michael Jackson who was daring, innovative, and unequivocally in control of his artistic vision. The world listened, mesmerized, as he danced through Don't Stop Till You Get Enough, and soared through Rock With You. The atmosphere around him transformed into a whirlwind of unparalleled creativity. Collaborations with Quincy Jones, a musical titan, proved to be a stroke of genius, forging a partnership that would redefine popular music. Michael was no longer just a talented young artist. He was a visionary, meticulously crafting every note, every vocal nuance, every beat. He spent countless hours in the studio, a solitary figure lost in the labyrinth of sound, chasing the perfect rhythm, the most evocative melody. The initial success of Off the Wall was intoxicating, a validation of his burgeoning independence. Yet, even then, the seeds of isolation were being sown. The higher he climbed, the more rarefied the air became, the fewer people truly understood the unique pressures he faced. Then came Thriller. Released in 1982, it wasn't just an album, it was a cultural phenomenon, a lightning bolt that struck the very core of global consciousness. The music was infectious, revolutionary, a seamless fusion of pop, rock, and soul. But it was the visuals that truly cemented its legendary status. The groundbreaking short films, as he called them, were cinematic masterpieces, transforming music videos into an art form. The meticulously choreographed zombie dance in Thriller, the electrifying street showdown in Beat It, the cool swagger of Billie Jean, these images burned themselves into the collective memory of a generation. Michael Jackson, the artist, had transformed into an unprecedented global superstar. The roar of the crowds became a deafening symphony, the flashes of paparazzi cameras a perpetual storm. He was everywhere, his face adorning magazines, his music blaring from every radio, his dance moves mimicked on every street corner. The magnitude of his success was overwhelming, bordering on the surreal. He was driven by a perfectionist streak, an insatiable desire to push boundaries, to create something truly unparalleled. Yet, beneath the dazzling veneer of fame, a profound sense of isolation began to settle. The sheer weight of public expectation was a crushing burden, and the loss of personal anonymity was a constant, gnawing pain. He could no longer walk down a street, visit a store, or simply exist without being mobbed, scrutinized, idolized, or dissected. The world wanted a piece of him, and in its ravenous hunger, it threatened to consume him whole. The Thriller phenomenon reached its dizzying zenith in 1983, captivating the world with its unprecedented fusion of music and visual artistry. The album continued to dominate charts, break records, and redefine the very concept of global entertainment. Michael Jackson became more than a musician, he was an icon, a living legend whose every move was scrutinized, celebrated, and imitated. His performance of the Moonwalk during the Motown 25 Inches special was a moment of pure magic, a fluid, gravity-defying glide that captivated millions and solidified his status as a dance innovator. The world watched in awe, believing they were witnessing a man touched by something divine. But even as Thriller continued its reign, Michael was already pushing forward, driven by an inner compulsion to surpass himself. The creation of the Bad album, released in 1987, was another monumental undertaking. It was a darker, edgier sound, reflecting a growing complexity in his artistry and his psyche. The short films accompanying the singles were once again groundbreaking, pushing the boundaries of storytelling in music. Martin Scorsese directed the epic Bad video, a 13-minute cinematic experience, while Smooth Criminal introduced the iconic anti-gravity lean. The subsequent Bad World Tour was a spectacle of imperial dominance, a global procession of sold-out stadiums and adoring fans who hung on his every gesture, every vocal flourish. The atmosphere was one of awe-inspiring spectacle, a testament to his unparalleled showmanship. Yet, beneath the glittering surface of his global empire, a different kind of construction was underway. In the rolling hills of Santa Barbara County, California, Neverland Ranch began to take shape. It wasn't just a home, it was a fantastical refuge, a personal sanctuary from the relentless glare of the world. With its amusement park rides, zoo, and movie theater, Neverland was a physical manifestation of Michael's desire to reclaim a lost childhood, a place where he could experience the simple joys he had been denied. It was a place designed for innocence, a bubble against the harsh realities outside its gates. This retreat into an increasingly insular world, however, also fueled a growing public fascination with his personal life. The media, always hungry for a story, began to dissect his every move, his every utterance. Whispers about his physical changes grew louder, transitioning from curious observation to outright speculation and rumor. His skin, once dark, was noticeably lighter. His nose, once broad, was now finely sculpted. The public's curiosity, initially fueled by adoration, began to turn into a more intrusive, almost predatory gaze. His growing eccentricities, the chimpanzee bubbles, the oxygen tent, the elaborate costumes, all became fodder for a burgeoning tabloid culture. The mystique that once surrounded him, born of his otherworldly talent, was now tinged with a growing undercurrent of speculation about his private world, a world he was trying desperately to control. His psychological state oscillated between triumphant artistic expression on stage and a profound retreat into the controlled, childlike environment of Neverland. He sought control over his immediate surroundings as a sanctuary, but this very act, in its extreme, fostered an almost childlike detachment from conventional reality, making him seem both otherworldly and increasingly vulnerable. The dangerous era, beginning in 1988 and extending into the early 90s, saw Michael Jackson continue his reign as a musical innovator. The album, released in 1991, was another commercial triumph, featuring hits like Black or White and Remember the Time. The accompanying megatours were grand, theatrical spectacles, reaffirming his status as the king of pop. The sheer scale of his artistic output during this period was breathtaking, a testament to his boundless creativity and relentless work ethic. However, a darkening cloud was beginning to gather on the horizon, threatening to overshadow even his most brilliant achievements. The tabloid focus on his appearance and lifestyle intensified, morphing from mere curiosity into a relentless, often cruel, dissection. Every rumored surgery, every perceived oddity, was blown out of proportion, creating a caricature that bore little resemblance to the complex, sensitive man beneath the headlines. The atmosphere around him became increasingly tense, shifting from universal adoration to a growing skepticism, and in some quarters, outright hostility. The paradox of his fame was accelerating. The more he achieved artistically, the more relentlessly his private life was scrutinized and judged. It was during this time, a period of immense artistic output, that the first serious allegations of child molestation began to surface in 1993. The whispers quickly escalated into a roar, a sudden, brutal collision between his carefully constructed world and the harsh realities of public accusation. For Michael, it was a profound betrayal, a shockwave that reverberated through his very being. He had built Neverland as a haven for children, a place of innocent joy, and now it was being twisted into something sinister. He felt misunderstood, targeted, and deeply, deeply hurt. His psychological state shifted dramatically, from creative triumph to a defensive posture, a retreat deeper into the sanctuary of his art and his curated environment, a desperate attempt to shield himself from the encroaching darkness. The year 1993 dawned, bright and full of promise, but it quickly devolved into a maelstrom that would forever alter the course of Michael Jackson's life. The initial child molestation allegations, stemming from the Jordan Chandler family, broke like a thunderclap across the global media landscape. The world, already fascinated by Michael's eccentricities, was now gripped by a scandal of unprecedented proportions. The news spread like wildfire, igniting a ferocious media frenzy that consumed every news cycle, every front page, every talk show. The atmosphere became toxic, thick with sensationalism and moral panic. Michael, who had always sought to control his public image, was now at the mercy of a narrative spun by headlines and rumor. He vehemently denied the allegations, his voice trembling with a mixture of disbelief and outrage during a televised statement. "I am absolutely innocent," he declared, his eyes wide with a pain that seemed to penetrate the screen. But his words were often lost in the cacophony of accusations and speculation. A police investigation was swiftly launched, a cold, clinical process that invaded the most intimate corners of his life. The once sacred halls of Neverland were subjected to searches, its whimsical wonders now seen through the grim lens of suspicion. The public, once his adoring fans, was now divided, many turning on him with a ferocity that felt deeply personal. The rapid erosion of public trust was palpable, leaving Michael in a state of unprecedented personal and professional jeopardy. The Dangerous Tour, a global spectacle of his artistic prowess, was abruptly cancelled, its remaining dates dissolving into a void of uncertainty. The physical and mental toll on Michael was immense. He visibly withered under the pressure, his gaunt frame a testament to the sleepless nights and relentless stress. He sought refuge in pain medication, a desperate attempt to numb the emotional agony that threatened to consume him. This was not just a legal battle, it was a public crucifixion. His psychological state spiraled into shock, despair, and intense emotional pain. He felt unjustly accused, persecuted by a world that seemed determined to tear him down. The constant barrage of accusations, the intrusive questions, the public judgment, it was an unbearable weight. He began to exhibit signs of extreme physical and mental exhaustion, his body failing under the strain. A growing sense of paranoia began to take root, a belief that he was being targeted, that the world was against him. This period marked a profound and irreversible turning point in his life, forever scarring his psyche and reshaping his perception of fame, trust, and the very nature of human connection. The light that once shone so brightly around him now seemed to flicker, threatened by an encroaching, suffocating darkness. The out-of-court settlement that eventually followed, while bringing a legal end to that particular chapter, did little to mend the deep wounds inflicted, leaving a lingering shadow that would follow him for the rest of his days. The out-of-court settlement in 1993, while a legal cessation, offered no true solace. It was a bandage over a gaping wound, leaving Michael Jackson in a state of profound emotional rawness, a deep-seated conviction of having been betrayed by a world he had so desperately tried to enchant. The lingering shadow of suspicion, thick and suffocating, followed him like a malevolent specter, even as the immediate legal storm abated. His once unshakable belief in the innocence of his intentions, in the purity of his heart, had been irrevocably shattered. He felt hunted, misunderstood, and utterly alone in the vast, echoing chambers of his fame. Yet, even in the depths of this despair, a flicker of defiance remained, a stubborn refusal to be consumed. The world watched, breathless, as Michael Jackson, the accused, the wounded, took a step that stunned many. He married Lisa Marie Presley, the daughter of Elvis. The announcement in May 1994, following months of swirling rumors, was met with a mix of skepticism and bewildered fascination. Their union, framed by Michael as a genuine connection, felt to many like a carefully orchestrated attempt to reclaim a semblance of normalcy, to project an image of conventional family life that might counteract the recent scandal. For Michael, perhaps, it was both. Lisa Marie, herself a child of unparalleled celebrity, understood the unique burden of a famous name, the suffocating embrace of public expectation. Their private moments, away from the glare, might have offered a fleeting glimpse of shared understanding, a quiet refuge in the storm. Yet, the public performance of their affection, the staged kisses, the declarations of love, often felt strained, a theatrical flourish rather than an organic outpouring. Beneath the veneer of this new personal chapter, Michael's artistic engine continued to hum, albeit with a darker, more urgent rhythm. He channeled his pain, his anger, his sense of injustice, into his music. The result was History, Past, Present and Future, Book 1, released in 1995. It wasn't just an album, it was a defiant roar, a sprawling double-disc opus that served as a musical autobiography and a blistering retort to his accusers. The album cover, a monumental statue of Michael himself, stood as an unyielding challenge to his critics, a declaration of his enduring legacy. The first disc, a collection of his greatest hits, served as a powerful reminder of his unparalleled artistry, a testament to the talent that had once united the world. But it was the second disc, History Continues, that truly laid bare his wounded soul. Tracks like Scream, a fiery duet with his sister Janet, pulsed with raw fury against the media's relentless scrutiny. They Don't Care About Us was a visceral cry of anguish against prejudice and injustice, its lyrics biting, its rhythm pounding with a desperate energy. Stranger in Moscow painted a poignant picture of profound isolation, a man adrift in a world that no longer felt like home. The atmosphere surrounding the album's release was charged with a palpable tension. Public skepticism lingered, a heavy cloud that refused to dissipate, but it was met with a renewed artistic energy from Michael that was undeniable. He was reclaiming his narrative, not through words alone, but through the universal language of music. He poured countless hours into the studio, meticulously crafting each track, each vocal inflection imbued with the weight of his recent trials. Karen Fay, his longtime makeup artist and confidant, observed him during this period, seeing the lines of stress etched deeper around his eyes, the subtle tremor in his hands, but also the fierce determination that still burned within him. He was a wounded warrior, but one who refused to lay down his sword. The subsequent History World Tour was a monumental undertaking, designed not just as a concert series but as a global statement. From the moment Michael descended onto the stage in a blaze of pyrotechnics and military regalia, it was clear this was a performance of defiance. The crowds, though perhaps smaller in some regions than during his bad or dangerous peaks, were still immense, and their adoration was fierce, a testament to his enduring star power. He moved with a renewed intensity, each dance step a declaration, each soaring vocal a cry for vindication. Yet, behind the spectacle, the private moments revealed a different truth. The exhaustion was profound, the emotional toll immense. Lisa Marie, who sometimes traveled with him, witnessed the oscillating moods, the moments of quiet vulnerability contrasting sharply with the public persona of the unyielding king of pop. The shadow of the past, though momentarily obscured by the stage lights, never truly receded. He was driven to create, to perform, to prove his worth, but the underlying fragility remained, a constant ache in his soul, a lingering sense of being profoundly misunderstood. The marriage to Lisa Marie Presley, a union born perhaps as much from shared isolation as genuine romantic passion, ultimately proved unsustainable under the relentless glare of public scrutiny and the weight of their own complex histories. By 1996, the fairy tale had dissolved, leaving behind a trail of unanswered questions and two individuals forever bound by a brief, intense chapter. For Michael, the yearning for a family, for the simple, anchoring love he had been denied in his own childhood, remained a powerful, almost desperate desire. This longing soon led him to Debbie Rowe, a nurse who had worked in his dermatologist's office. Their relationship, private and largely inscrutable to the outside world, blossomed into a quiet partnership, one centered on Michael's profound wish for fatherhood. Their marriage in November 1996 was a quiet affair, a stark contrast to the global spectacle that usually accompanied anything Michael Jackson did. It was a deliberate retreat from the public eye, an attempt to carve out a space where he could finally experience the domesticity he craved. The birth of Prince Michael Jackson I in February 1997, followed by Paris Jackson in April 1998, brought an unparalleled joy into Michael's life. Neverland, once a fantastical playground, now truly became a home, a sanctuary where he could nurture his children away from the prying eyes of the world. The atmosphere during these years, from 1996 to 2000, was distinctly more private and introspective. Neverland, with its sprawling acres and whimsical attractions, became a true haven. Michael would spend hours with Prince in Paris, pushing them on swings, reading stories, watching movies in his private theater. He delighted in their laughter, their innocence, seeing in their unspoiled joy a reflection of the childhood he had lost. Katherine Jackson, his mother, would visit, her gentle presence a grounding force amidst the fantastical surroundings. She saw a son who, despite his global fame, was searching for the most fundamental human connections, finding profound purpose in the simple act of being a father. Debbie Rowe, in her own way, provided a quiet stability during this period. She understood Michael's need for privacy, his aversion to the conventional, and his deep desire to protect his children. Yet, even within this curated sanctuary, the seeds of future strain were being sown. The upkeep of Neverland was immense, a constant drain on his already complex financial affairs. John Branca, his longtime attorney, worked tirelessly behind the scenes, navigating intricate business dealings, managing his vast intellectual property, and attempting to keep pace with the mounting expenses. The financial complexities were a subtle but ever-present undercurrent, a quiet hum beneath the laughter of children and the gentle rustle of the Neverland trees. Michael, during this time, experienced a rare sense of normalcy, a profound fulfillment in fatherhood that had long eluded him. He found a purpose beyond artistic creation, a love that was unconditional and pure. However, this contentment was juxtaposed with an increasing detachment from the conventional world. Neverland, while a sanctuary, also served as a kind of gilded cage, further isolating him from the mundane realities of everyday life. He created an environment perfectly tailored to his unique sensitivities, but in doing so, he deepened his reliance on this curated world, making the prospect of re-engaging with the outside increasingly daunting. The world outside Neverland continued to spin, but for Michael, immersed in the joys of fatherhood, it felt a million miles away, a distant hum he could almost ignore. As the new millennium dawned, Michael Jackson, now a devoted father living in the relative seclusion of Neverland, felt the familiar pull of artistic ambition. It had been 8 years since his last original studio album, and the music world, though still acknowledging his legendary status, was moving on. He yearned to prove his continued relevance, to once again dominate the charts and silence any whispers of his creative decline. This drive culminated in the release of Invincible in 2001, an album into which he poured an immense amount of creative energy and, crucially, financial investment. The atmosphere surrounding Invincible was one of high stakes and simmering tension. Michael envisioned it as another magnum opus, a defiant statement of his enduring genius. He meticulously crafted each track, spending countless hours in the studio, chasing perfection with the same intensity that had defined his earlier work. He collaborated with a new generation of producers, attempting to fuse his signature sound with contemporary R&B and hip-hop influences. The album was sleek, modern, and undeniably well-produced. Yet, despite its artistic merits and the significant resources poured into its creation and marketing, Invincible struggled to meet the stratospheric expectations set by Thriller and Bad. It sold well, but not exceptionally, failing to reclaim the cultural zeitgeist in the way Michael had desperately hoped. This perceived underperformance ignited a bitter and very public dispute with Sony Music, his longtime label. Michael felt betrayed, believing Sony had not adequately promoted the album. He publicly accused Sony Music chairman Tommy Mottola of racism and sabotaging his career, staging protests outside Sony's New York headquarters. The corporate battle was draining, a constant source of frustration that added immense pressure to his already fragile psyche. He felt embattled, fighting not just for his artistic legacy but for control over his own creations. Amidst this industry friction, Michael continued to make public appearances, each one a magnet for intense scrutiny. The 30 Years of Thriller celebration in September 2001, held at Madison Square Garden, was meant to be a triumphant retrospective, a reminder of his unparalleled impact. He performed alongside his brothers, a nostalgic nod to his roots, and shared the stage with a host of contemporary stars who openly acknowledged his influence. Yet, even during this celebratory event, the cameras lingered, not just on his performance, but on his physical appearance. The changes to his face, the increasingly gaunt frame, the visible makeup all became fodder for incessant public fascination and whispered critiques. His health, always a subject of speculation, now came under even closer scrutiny. Michael's psychological state during this period was a complex mixture of artistic validation and profound frustration. He was driven to prove his continued relevance, to show the world that the king of pop still reigned. But this ambition was constantly undermined by corporate disputes and the relentless public focus on his eccentricities, which often overshadowed his music. He felt a heightened sense of stress, a perpetual state of being under siege, both from within the music industry and from the insatiable maw of the media. The world seemed less interested in his art and more obsessed with the man behind the mask, a man increasingly weary from the never-ending battle to control his own narrative. The dream of Invincible had become another heavy burden, a testament to the immense cost of maintaining his legendary status. The year 2003 arrived, bringing with it a chilling new chapter in Michael Jackson's ongoing saga with the media. For months, British journalist Martin Bashir had been granted unprecedented access to Michael's life, ostensibly for a documentary intended to offer an intimate, sympathetic portrait. Michael, desperate to counter the lingering negative perceptions from the 1993 allegations, had opened his doors, his heart, and the private world of Neverland to Bashir. He believed this was his chance to finally tell his story, to show the world the truth of his life as a devoted father and a misunderstood humanitarian. The documentary, titled Living with Michael Jackson, aired globally in February 2003. The atmosphere it created was not one of understanding or sympathy, but rather a devastating media onslaught that reignited public outrage and prejudice with a ferocity that eclipsed even the 1993 scandal. Bashir's narrative, presented with a dramatic, almost accusatory tone, meticulously highlighted Michael's eccentricities, his continued plastic surgeries, his unusual sleeping arrangements, his belief in a Peter Pan-like existence at Neverland. But the most damaging segment, the one that ignited the firestorm, was Bashir's portrayal of Michael's relationship with children, specifically his admission that he allowed children to sleep in his bed. The impact was immediate and catastrophic. The footage, edited to emphasize Michael's most controversial statements and behaviors, painted a picture of a man disconnected from reality, a figure whose unconventional lifestyle bordered on the disturbing. The public reaction was one of widespread condemnation. The toxic atmosphere that had briefly subsided after the 1993 settlement returned with a vengeance, more potent and damaging than before. Talk shows dissected every frame, tabloids screamed headlines of renewed suspicion, and public opinion plummeted. It was a severe blow to his already fragile public perception, pushing him further into a defensive, almost impenetrable isolation. Michael, watching the documentary unfold, experienced a profound sense of humiliation, anger, and betrayal. He felt deliberately misrepresented, exploited by someone he had trusted. His initial reaction was one of disbelief, then a searing fury. He had opened his home, shared his vulnerabilities, believing he was speaking to a sympathetic ear, only to find his words twisted, his intentions maligned. "He betrayed my trust," Michael reportedly confided to Karen Fay, his voice laced with a pain that was almost unbearable. "He made me out to be a monster." This profound sense of betrayal led to a renewed sense of persecution, a confirmation of his deepest fears that the world was inherently hostile, eager to tear him down. The breakdown of trust, already fragile, became almost complete. He felt cornered, a wounded animal in the spotlight, with nowhere left to hide. The dream of vindication through a sympathetic media portrayal had turned into a nightmare, plunging him back into the familiar abyss of public suspicion and legal scrutiny. The Bashir documentary wasn't just a media event, it was a psychological assault that left Michael Jackson more isolated, more paranoid, and more vulnerable than ever before. The repercussions of the Martin Bashir documentary were swift and brutal, culminating in the most terrifying event of Michael Jackson's adult life. The seeds of suspicion sown by the program quickly germinated into a full-blown criminal investigation. On November 18, 2003, just months after the documentary aired, Michael Jackson was formally charged with multiple counts of child molestation. The morning of his arrest on November 20th was a scene of surreal, high-stakes legal drama. Michael had been at the bedside of his ailing mother, Catherine, when the news reached him. He had rushed back to Neverland, a place that now felt less like a sanctuary and more like a trap. The atmosphere was one of grim foreboding, a palpable tension that hung heavy in the air, thick with the scent of fear and the distant hum of news helicopters. As he surrendered to authorities in Santa Barbara, the world watched, utterly transfixed. The booking process was a stark, dehumanizing ordeal. Michael Jackson, the king of pop, whose image had graced countless magazine covers and billboards, was now reduced to a mugshot, his face a mask of weary despair, his eyes hollowed by sleepless nights and overwhelming anxiety. The cold click of the handcuffs, the sterile scent of the police station, the impersonal questions, each detail was a fresh assault on his already shattered psyche. The media, once again, was in a feeding frenzy, their cameras flashing like predatory eyes, capturing every agonizing moment for a ravenous global audience. Every news channel, every major publication, screamed headlines of his arrest, sensationalizing every detail, preempting any presumption of innocence. For Michael, it felt like an inescapable nightmare, a cruel repetition of the 1993 events, only this time, the stakes were even higher. The initial out-of-court settlement had bought him a temporary reprieve, but now, he faced the very real prospect of a career-ending trial, and potentially, years in prison. His psychological state plummeted into profound fear, despair, and mental exhaustion. The repetition of similar accusations, the relentless public judgment, the sense of his life spiraling completely out of control, it was an unbearable burden. He was physically and emotionally drained, his body a fragile shell around a tormented soul. He felt targeted, persecuted, a victim of a system that seemed determined to destroy him. The world, once his stage, now felt like a courtroom, with billions of spectators ready to pass judgment. The initial legal proceedings leading up to the 2005 trial were a blur of motions, hearings, and strategic maneuvering by his legal team. But for Michael, each step was a fresh reminder of the precipice on which he stood. The weight of it all was crushing, threatening to extinguish the last vestiges of his spirit. He looked out at the flashing lights, the sea of faces, and saw not fans, but accusers, their collective gaze a burning indictment. His life, once a symphony of unparalleled success, had become a discordant, terrifying cacophony, echoing with the grim certainty of an impending battle for his very freedom. The air in Santa Maria, California, in January 2005, was crisp, carrying the faint, earthy scent of coastal chaparral, a stark contrast to the suffocating environment that had descended upon the courthouse. The world's gaze, sharp and unblinking, had once again fixed itself upon Michael Jackson, now not as the king of pop, but as the defendant in a child molestation trial that threatened to eclipse every triumph, every innovation, every iconic moment of his extraordinary life. From the moment the first gavel struck, signaling the commencement of proceedings. A palpable sense of dread settled over the small town, radiating outwards to dominate global headlines. Each morning, before the pale winter sun had fully chased away the pre-dawn chill, the streets surrounding the courthouse transformed into a chaotic theater. Barricades, erected with grim efficiency, struggled to contain the throngs of media reporters clutching microphones, camera operators jockeying for position, satellite trucks bristling with antennae. The air buzzed with the low growl of generators, the urgent chatter of live broadcasts, and the incessant click of camera shutters. Amidst this maelstrom, a smaller, more fervent crowd gathered, the loyal fans, bundled against the cold, holding signs of support, their faces etched with a mix of defiance and desperate hope. And then there were the others, the protesters, their voices sharp with condemnation, their signs mirroring the damning headlines that fed the insatiable public appetite for scandal. It was a suffocating environment, an arena of relentless media scrutiny, legal confrontation, and public judgment, where every gesture, every whispered word, was magnified, distorted, and broadcast across continents. Michael, a fragile figure wrapped in tailored suits that seemed to hang loosely on his frame, arrived each day in a black SUV, a shield against the relentless glare. His entrance was a spectacle in itself. He would emerge, often with his mother, Catherine, a pillar of quiet strength beside him, or his sister Latoya, her face a mask of concern. His eyes, often hidden behind dark glasses, sometimes betrayed a profound weariness, a deep-seated pain that seemed to emanate from his very bones. The short walk from the vehicle to the courthouse doors was a gauntlet, a daily public crucifixion under the merciless gaze of the world. The flashbulbs popped like miniature explosions, the shouts of reporters a cacophony of accusation and demand. He would move with a slow, almost ethereal grace, his head often bowed, as if trying to shrink from the immense pressure, to disappear into the very fabric of the expensive cloth he wore. Inside the courtroom, the atmosphere was colder, more sterile, yet no less intense. The air, conditioned to a constant chill, carried the faint scent of old paper and polished wood. Judge Rodney Melville, a stern, unyielding presence, presided over the proceedings with an authority that brooked no challenge. To Michael, seated at the defense table, the room felt like a cage, its walls closing in, its every sound amplified. He would often sketch in a notebook, a quiet, almost childlike act of escape, a desperate attempt to create a small, private world amidst the public dissection of his life. The prosecution, led by Tom Sneddon, a man whose determination to secure a conviction was palpable, began its arguments with a chilling precision. Sneddon painted a picture of Michael Jackson as a manipulative predator, using his fame and wealth to ensnare vulnerable children. The initial arguments were designed to shock, to outrage, to confirm the darkest suspicions held by a segment of the public. Witness after witness took the stand, their testimonies weaving a narrative of alleged abuse, of a Neverland that was not a haven but a trap. The accuser's family, the Arvizos, recounted their story with an emotional intensity that resonated in the hushed courtroom. Michael listened, his face impassive, sometimes flinching almost imperceptibly at a particularly damning detail, his jaw clenching. He felt a profound sense of injustice, a burning indignation that his deepest intentions, his very nature, were being so grotesquely distorted. Each day was an agonizing ordeal, a relentless assault on his character and his sanity. The hours stretched, punctuated by the drone of legal jargon, the rustle of papers, the occasional sharp intake of breath from the gallery. Michael's psychological state was one of extreme stress and emotional fragility. He oscillated between moments of defiant resolve, when he would meet a prosecutor's gaze with a flicker of his old fire, and periods of utter despair, when he seemed to shrink into himself, his body language conveying a profound vulnerability. He was physically and mentally drained, the weight of the accusations pressing down on him, slowly eroding his reserves. Karen Fay, his makeup artist, who often accompanied him, observed the toll it was taking. She saw him struggle with sleeplessness, his eyes perpetually shadowed, his skin pale beneath the careful application of makeup. He was often late to court, sometimes requiring assistance to get there, a testament to the sheer physical and mental exhaustion that gripped him. His gaunt appearance, widely noted by the media, was not merely a physical manifestation. It was a visible wound, a symptom of the intense psychological warfare being waged against him. The palpable sense of dread in the courtroom was not just for the outcome, but for the very survival of the man at its center. He was fighting for his freedom, his reputation, and the very essence of who he believed himself to be, against a world that seemed determined to crucify him. As January bled into May of 2005, The trial continued its relentless march, each day a new battle waged in the suffocating confines of the Santa Maria courtroom. The prosecution, having laid out its damning case, rested, leaving behind a lingering stench of suspicion in a public deeply divided. Michael Jackson, though present, often felt like a ghost in his own trial, his fate being debated by others, his voice muted by legal protocol. He would stare out the window during breaks, his gaze fixed on the distant, hazy hills, yearning for the peace of Neverland, a place now irrevocably tainted by the allegations. Then came June, a month that would forever be etched into the annals of legal history and Michael Jackson's tortured biography. It was the defense's turn, a moment of profound tension and cautious hope. Led by the formidable Thomas Mesereau, a lawyer with a sharp mind and an even sharper tongue, the defense team began to dismantle the prosecution's narrative, piece by painstaking piece. The atmosphere in the courtroom shifted, from a relentless barrage of accusation to a meticulous, methodical challenge to the accuser's credibility. Mesereau's strategy was clear: expose inconsistencies, reveal ulterior motives, and paint a picture of a family driven by financial gain rather than genuine concern. Witnesses for the defense took the stand, offering alternative narratives, shedding light on the complexities of the accuser's family dynamics. They spoke of the accuser's mother, Janet Arvizo, and her alleged history of fraud and manipulation. They presented evidence challenging the timeline of events, poking holes in the prosecution's carefully constructed story. The cross-examinations were brutal, relentless, designed to expose the cracks in the accuser's testimonies. Michael, watching from the defense table, felt a flicker of vindication, a fragile hope that the truth, his truth, might finally emerge from the shadows. He still sketched, but now with a slightly firmer hand, his eyes sometimes following Mesereau with a look of desperate gratitude. The climax arrived on June 13, 2005. The jury, after days of deliberation, returned to the courtroom. The air was thick, heavy with unspoken anticipation. Every eye in the room, from the stern judge to the hushed reporters, from Michael's nervous family to the impassive jurors, was fixed on the foreman. Michael himself sat unusually still, his hands clasped tightly, his breathing shallow. He later recounted feeling a profound sense of calm, a strange detachment, as if watching a scene unfold from a great distance. Then, the words came, delivered with a slow, deliberate cadence that seemed to stretch time itself. Not guilty. Count after count, the verdict was the same. Not guilty. On all 10 counts, Michael Jackson was acquitted. A collective gasp swept through the courtroom, followed by a ripple of relief from his supporters and a stunned silence from the prosecution. Michael, for a moment, simply closed his eyes, a single tear tracing a path down his cheek. Catherine, beside him, reached for his hand, her grip firm, her eyes brimming. The victory was profound, a judicial vindication that cleared his name in the eyes of the law. His departure from the courthouse that day was markedly different from his daily entrances. There was no triumphant fanfare, no grand declaration. Instead, he slipped away quietly, almost invisibly, escorted by his legal team and security. The immediate aftermath was a complex tapestry of mixed public reactions. For his fans, it was a moment of fervent celebration, a vindication of their unwavering faith. They cheered, wept, and embraced outside the courthouse, their signs of support now waving in triumph. But for many others, particularly those who had believed the accusations, the verdict left a lingering sense of unease, a feeling that justice had not been fully served. The public division remained, a chasm that no legal ruling could fully bridge. Michael himself experienced a profound wave of relief, a release of tension that had coiled in his body for years. But it was a victory tinged with an undeniable bitterness, a deep emotional scar that would never truly heal. He felt vindicated, yes, but also deeply damaged by the ordeal. The trial had stripped him bare, exposed his vulnerabilities, and forced him to confront the darkest aspects of public perception. He had survived, but at an immense cost. The desire to retreat from the public eye, which had been a quiet yearning before the trial, now became an urgent, almost desperate necessity. He longed for anonymity, for a quiet corner of the world where he could simply exist, unjudged, unscrutinized. The legal battle was over, but the psychological war had left him deeply wounded, forever changed, and craving an escape from the relentless glare that had defined his life. The acquittal, while a legal triumph, offered no true liberation for Michael Jackson. Instead, it marked the beginning of a profound and prolonged exile, a desperate attempt to escape the relentless scrutiny and the lingering shadow of suspicion that clung to him like a shroud. From 2005 to 2008, he became a wanderer, a global nomad seeking solace and anonymity in distant lands, far from the American public that had both adored and condemned him. His first port of call was Bahrain, a small island nation in the Persian Gulf. The atmosphere there was one of quiet retreat, a stark contrast to the media circus of Santa Maria. He was hosted by Sheikh Abdullah bin Hamad Al Khalifa, a member of the royal family and a fan, who offered him lavish hospitality and the promise of peace. Michael sought to rebuild his life, to find a semblance of normalcy away from the prying eyes of the world. He spent time with his children, Prince, Paris, and Blanket, attempting to create a stable environment for them, far from the headlines. He even considered a new career path, dabbling in animation and potentially a musical collaboration with the Sheikh. However, the financial precariousness that had always shadowed his life soon caught up with him. The lavish lifestyle, the immense legal fees, and the ongoing upkeep of Neverland, even in his absence, continued to drain his resources. The promise of a new beginning in Bahrain eventually soured, leading to a legal dispute over alleged broken agreements, a bitter reminder that even in exile, financial pressures were inescapable. From Bahrain, his journey took him to various locations across Europe. A continent that offered a temporary shield from the American paparazzi. He lived for a time in Ireland, a land of verdant hills and ancient castles, where the whispers of his past were softer, less insistent. He rented sprawling estates, attempting to recreate the insulated world of Neverland, but the magic was gone. The grand rooms felt hollow, echoing with a loneliness that no amount of luxurious furnishings could fill. He would stroll through manicured gardens, a solitary figure often accompanied by his children, their laughter the only genuine warmth in the vast, imposing spaces. The financial struggles, however, were relentless, a phantom limb that ached constantly. His legal battles, his sprawling entourage, the sheer cost of maintaining his lifestyle, compounded by years of reduced income and costly settlements, meant that even in his quietest moments, the shadow of debt loomed large. He was a man adrift, a king without a kingdom, his once bright star now obscured by clouds of controversy and personal turmoil. The signs of physical and emotional deterioration, subtle at first, became increasingly apparent. His already slender frame grew gaunter, his movements sometimes betraying a profound weariness. His eyes, once sparkling with an almost childlike wonder, now held a haunted, faraway look. He sought solace in sleep, but sleep often eluded him, replaced by a restless, anxious wakefulness. The stories of his growing dependency on various medications, whispers that had circulated for years, began to solidify into a grim reality among his dwindling inner circle. He was seeking not just rest, but escape, a temporary reprieve from the relentless pressure of his own existence. He longed for stability, for a sense of belonging, but found only transient havens, each one failing to fill the void within. His psychological state was one of profound weariness and disillusionment, a man perpetually searching for a peace that seemed just out of reach, exhibiting a deep-seated fragility and a longing for a stability that his extraordinary life had long denied him. Then, from the quiet desperation of his European exile, a beacon of hope, or perhaps a mirage, appeared on the horizon. It was early 2009, and the world was still reeling from a global financial crisis. But for Michael Jackson, a different kind of crisis had been brewing for years. He was in Los Angeles, a city that now felt both familiar and alien, when the call came. Randy Phillips, CEO of AEG Live, and Paul Gongaware, co-CEO, presented an audacious proposal, a series of 10 comeback concerts at London's iconic O2 Arena. The initial atmosphere was electric, charged with a sudden surge of hope. It was a chance, perhaps his last, to reclaim his throne, to secure his children's future, and to silence the critics who had written him off. He stood before the cameras at the O2 Arena in March, a figure both frail and defiant, announcing, "This is it." The roar of the assembled media, the flash of 1,000 cameras, the palpable excitement in the air, it was a sensation he hadn't felt in years. The tickets, initially for 10 shows, sold out in minutes. The demand was unprecedented, a testament to his enduring, almost mythical, star power. AEG, sensing the fervor, quickly added more dates, pushing the total to 50 shows. 50 nights, 50 performances, an almost impossible feat for a man whose health was already precarious. The pressure placed upon Michael was immediate and immense. It was a double-edged sword, the adoration of millions, a validation of his genius, but also the crushing weight of expectation. He was not just performing, he was attempting a resurrection, a spectacle of epic proportions that demanded every ounce of his being. The atmosphere became electric with anticipation for a legendary comeback, yet beneath the surface, an undercurrent of concern began to ripple through his team. Could he withstand the immense physical and mental demands? Could the man who had retreated from the world for so long truly step back into the blinding spotlight for 50 consecutive nights? Michael, during this period, experienced a tumultuous mix of renewed purpose and immense anxiety. He was determined to prove himself, to leave a legacy of financial security for his beloved children. He spoke of it often, his children's faces flashing before his mind's eye like a powerful, guiding light. But the sheer scale of the undertaking weighed heavily on him. 50 shows. The words alone were exhausting. He knew the world would be watching, scrutinizing his every move, ready to celebrate or condemn. This led to increased stress, a desperate need for coping mechanisms, and an almost childlike reliance on those around him to manage the overwhelming demands. The stage was set, the tickets sold, the world was waiting. The comeback, it seemed, was inevitable. But at what cost? By April 2009, the gravity of the "This Is It" undertaking began to manifest in the cavernous rehearsal studios of Los Angeles. The initial excitement of the announcement had given way to the grueling reality of preparation. Kenny Ortega, the director and choreographer, a man who had known Michael for years and understood his genius, found himself in a high-pressure, high-stakes environment where artistic ambition clashed profoundly with observable physical decline. The atmosphere in the rehearsal space was a strange blend of creative energy and hushed concern. The air, thick with the scent of sweat, old costumes, and the metallic tang of new stage equipment, vibrated with the hopeful rhythms of Michael's iconic music. Dancers, young and vibrant, moved with breathtaking precision, embodying the spirit of his legendary performances. Yet, when Michael himself stepped onto the floor, the energy shifted. In the initial weeks, his commitment was undeniable. He would arrive, often late, but with a spark in his eyes, a familiar flicker of the perfectionist who had redefined performance. He would interact with Ortega, discussing choreography, offering ideas, his creative mind still sharp and vibrant. He would demonstrate a move, a vocal inflection, and for brief, dazzling moments, the old magic would return, reminding everyone why he was the king of pop. His voice, though perhaps not as powerful as in his youth, still held its unique timbre, its emotional resonance. However, the demanding schedule, the sheer physical exertion required for even a fraction of the show, quickly began to take its toll. His energy levels fluctuated wildly. There were days he would dance with an almost youthful exuberance, captivating everyone present. Then there were days he would appear gaunt, withdrawn, his movements stiff, his eyes shadowed with an exhaustion that seemed to penetrate to his very soul. He would miss rehearsals or arrive for only brief periods, leaving Ortega and the team to work around his increasingly erratic presence. Randy Phillips and Paul Gongaware of AEG Live, the promoters, grew increasingly alarmed. They had invested millions, and the prospect of 50 sold-out shows hung precariously on Michael's ability to perform. Meetings became tense, hushed conversations taking place in corners of the studio, their voices low, laced with a mix of frustration and genuine worry. "He's not eating," someone would whisper. "He's not sleeping." The financial implications were catastrophic, but the human cost was beginning to overshadow everything. It was during this period that Dr. Conrad Murray's presence became increasingly prominent, almost omnipresent. Murray, a cardiologist, had been hired as Michael's personal physician, tasked with ensuring his health and readiness for the concerts. But his role, to the concern of many, seemed to expand beyond conventional medical care. He was Michael's gatekeeper, his confidant, his source of comfort. He would be seen ushering Michael in and out of rehearsals, a constant shadow, his demeanor often one of quiet authority. The alarm among Michael's longtime staff, particularly Karen Fay, his makeup artist, deepened with each passing day. She saw the physical changes up close, the way his skin looked dry, almost papery, the increasing difficulty he had with simple tasks, the desperation in his eyes for sleep. She observed his reliance on Dr. Murray, the way Michael would cling to the doctor's promises of rest, of relief. There was an unspoken fear, a growing sense of unease that something fundamentally wrong was happening. The atmosphere was one of mounting tension and hushed concern, as those around him witnessed a star struggling, visibly and painfully, to meet the impossible demands of his own legend. Michael's psychological state was under intense physical and psychological strain. He was battling not just exhaustion and insomnia, but the immense pressure of the comeback, the fear of failure, the desperate need to provide for his children. This led to an increasing dependency on Dr. Murray's medical interventions. He believed Murray held the key to his sleep, to his energy, to his ability to perform. The doctor's reassurances, his ready supply of sedatives, became a siren song to a man desperate for even a moment of peace. He was caught in a cycle, chasing sleep, chasing performance, chasing an elusive sense of well-being, all facilitated by a doctor whose practices were becoming increasingly questionable, pushing Michael closer and closer to a precipice he could not see. June 2009 arrived, not with the gentle warmth of summer, but with a chilling sense of foreboding that permeated the air around Michael Jackson. The final weeks leading up to the "This Is It" concerts were a period of escalating crisis, a tragic inevitability playing out in hushed tones and frantic whispers. Michael's declining health was no longer a matter of speculation, it was a stark, undeniable reality, a visible erosion of the man beneath the carefully applied stage makeup. Rehearsals, when he attended them, became less about performance and more about mere presence. His movements were often sluggish, his voice weak, a mere whisper of its former power. Kenny Ortega, his director, tried to coax him, to motivate him, but the spark that once ignited stadiums seemed dampened, almost extinguished. There were more missed rehearsals than attended ones, leading to growing alarm among the AEG executives, Phillips and Gongaware. They saw their immense investment, their entire comeback enterprise, teetering on the brink. They confronted Dr. Murray, their voices sharp with concern and veiled threats. "He has to be there," Phillips insisted, his face grim. "We need him on that stage." But Michael was beyond their reach, retreating deeper into a haze of sedatives. The escalating reliance on propofol, a powerful anesthetic typically administered in hospital settings, became his desperate quest for sleep. Dr. Conrad Murray, his personal physician, had become not just his doctor, but his sole conduit to oblivion. The cold, clinical reality of an IV drip, the hushed administration of the drug, replaced the natural rhythm of day and night. Michael, desperate for rest, for even a few hours of peace from the relentless pressure and chronic insomnia, had placed his absolute trust in Murray. Karen Fay, his longtime makeup artist, watched in growing horror. She saw the needle marks, the increasing fragility of his skin, the way his eyes would sometimes glaze over. She observed the profound change in his demeanor, from a man who, despite his eccentricities, was sharp and engaged, to one who was often disoriented, confused, barely present. "He's not well," she confided to others, her voice trembling. "Something is terribly wrong." The atmosphere among his inner circle was one of profound concern and helplessness. They saw a man slipping away, yet felt powerless to intervene against the authority of his chosen physician. The pressure of the impending concerts, a monumental weight, combined with the doctor's increasingly questionable medical practices, created a vortex of tragic circumstances. Michael's psychological state was one of extreme vulnerability, exhaustion, and profound addiction. He was caught in a vicious cycle. The pressure to perform led to insomnia, which led to a desperate craving for sleep, which led to Murray's sedatives, which further diminished his capacity for self-preservation. He was desperate for relief, for an end to the ceaseless anxiety that gnawed at him. He relied almost totally on Dr. Murray, seeing him as his savior, the only one who could grant him the precious gift of unconsciousness. His judgment was impaired, his will weakened by the potent cocktail of drugs. He was a man consumed by the need for sleep, a need that had become an all-encompassing, fatal obsession. The air in his rented mansion in Holmby Hills, usually a sanctuary, now hung heavy with an unspoken dread, a silent countdown to an inevitable, tragic end. The morning of June 25, 2009, dawned with an uncharacteristic quiet over the sprawling mansion in Holmby Hills. The air, typically vibrant with the promise of a Los Angeles summer day, felt heavy, pregnant with an unspoken tension. Inside, in the hushed opulence of Michael Jackson's bedroom, a different kind of silence reigned, broken only by the soft whir of medical equipment and the shallow, labored breathing of the sleeping star. Conrad Murray had been present throughout the night, a constant, watchful presence, administering a cocktail of sedatives in a desperate attempt to induce sleep. Michael, exhausted beyond measure, had yearned for oblivion, for an escape from the relentless demands of his impending comeback. Propofol, the powerful anesthetic, had finally delivered it, but at an unimaginable cost. The events of that fateful morning unfolded with a chilling precision, a slow-motion descent into tragedy. Murray, having administered the final dose of propofol around 10:40 a.m., settled into a chair by Michael's bedside. The room was dim, the heavy curtains drawn against the intrusive sunlight. the faint scent of antiseptic mingled with the subtle aroma of expensive linen. Murray later claimed he left the room for a few minutes, a decision that would haunt him forever. When he returned, the silence was different. Deeper, more profound. He approached the bed, a prickle of unease tracing its way up his spine. Michael's breathing, once shallow, had ceased. His chest was still. Murray's heart lurched. Panic, cold and sharp, seized him. He shook Michael, called his name, but there was no response. His skin was cool to the touch, his body unnervingly lifeless. A desperate, frantic energy coursed through Murray. He began attempts at resuscitation, pushing on Michael's chest, his movements clumsy, fueled by a terrifying cocktail of fear and disbelief. He fumbled for his phone, his hands shaking, dialing Michael's personal assistant, then eventually, 911. The emergency call, placed at 12:21 p.m., was a chilling testament to the unfolding crisis. "He's not breathing," Murray's voice, strained and panicked, echoed down the line. "He's not breathing. We're trying to pump him up, but he's not breathing." The dispatcher's calm, practiced instructions seemed utterly inadequate against the terrifying reality. The paramedics arrived swiftly, their sirens wailing faintly in the distance before cutting abruptly silent outside the mansion gates. They rushed into the bedroom, their faces grim, their movements precise and urgent. The scene they found was chaotic. Dr. Murray, disheveled and frantic, attempting CPR on Michael's motionless body. The room, once a picture of serene luxury, was now a tableau of medical emergency. Wires, tubes, and medical equipment lay scattered. The air crackled with the desperate energy of life-saving attempts. They worked on Michael for nearly an hour, their faces beaded with sweat, their efforts relentless. They inserted a breathing tube, administered epinephrine, shocked his heart with a defibrillator. Each thump of the chest, each jolt of electricity, was a futile attempt to coax life back into a body that had already surrendered. But it was too late. The light had gone out. At 1:07 p.m., Michael Jackson was pronounced dead at the UCLA Medical Center, a cold, clinical declaration that reverberated through the world with the force of a supernova. The atmosphere immediately following the pronouncement was one of frantic panic and utter disbelief among those closest to him. His children, Prince, Paris, and Blanket, were brought to the hospital, their young faces etched with confusion and dawning horror, their world shattered in an instant. Katherine Jackson, his mother, arrived, her quiet strength giving way to wrenching sobs. The news, once it broke, spread like wildfire, transforming into profound grief and global shock. Television networks interrupted programming, radio stations played his music on repeat, and social media exploded with tributes and expressions of sorrow. The world wept, collectively mourning the loss of a unique, troubled genius. Michael's final psychological state was one of unconsciousness, a deep, drug-induced sleep from which he would never awaken. For those around him, the psychological state was a maelstrom of shock, denial, and immediate confusion, rapidly turning to grief and horror as the irreversible truth settled in. The king of pop was gone, not with a final, triumphant bow, but in the quiet, tragic solitude of his own bedroom, a victim of the very pressures he had sought to escape. In the immediate aftermath of Michael Jackson's death on June 25, 2009, the world plunged into a collective state of mourning, a global outpouring of grief that transcended borders and cultural divides. Yet, beneath the waves of sorrow, a far more chilling reality began to unfold: a police investigation into the circumstances of his sudden and unexpected passing. The initial hours and days were a blur of activity, a collision of immense public emotion and the cold, methodical work of law enforcement. The air in Los Angeles, usually bright and bustling, hung heavy with a palpable sense of loss and unanswered questions. Fans gathered spontaneously at iconic locations, from the gates of Neverland Ranch to the Apollo Theater in Harlem, transforming them into makeshift shrines adorned with flowers, candles, handwritten notes, and tear-stained photographs. His music, once a soundtrack to joy and celebration, now played with a poignant, almost haunting resonance, a soundtrack to sorrow. The atmosphere was one of intense public mourning, a shared moment of global sorrow, but it was inextricably mixed with a rapidly growing demand for answers and accountability. The initial autopsy, performed in the days following his death, provided the first grim clues. The preliminary findings, while not immediately conclusive, pointed towards a complex interplay of drugs in his system. The toxicology reports, eagerly awaited by investigators and the public alike, would later reveal the devastating truth: a lethal cocktail of sedatives, with propofol, the powerful anesthetic, identified as the primary cause of death. The medical examiner's office, a place of clinical detachment, became a focal point for the world's morbid curiosity. The police investigation, led by the Los Angeles Police Department, began almost immediately, focusing squarely on Dr. Conrad Murray. The initial findings were deeply troubling. Murray's account of the morning, already riddled with inconsistencies, raised immediate red flags. The discovery of multiple medications, including propofol, in Michael's rented home, along with the lack of proper medical equipment for administering such potent drugs outside a hospital setting, painted a picture of deeply questionable medical practices. The atmosphere within the investigation team was one of intense focus and pressure. They knew they were handling a case of unprecedented public interest, and the world demanded truth and justice. Questions began to emerge, like dark tendrils, weaving through the narrative of grief. Why was Michael Jackson, a man struggling with insomnia, being administered a potent surgical anesthetic at home? Who was responsible for this catastrophic lapse in medical judgment? The Jackson family, shattered by their loss, quickly voiced their suspicions, pointing fingers directly at Dr. Murray. Katherine Jackson, her face etched with grief, demanded answers. Joe Jackson, his usual stern demeanor softened by sorrow, vowed to see justice done. The media, having just concluded its mourning period, swiftly pivoted to its new role as chronicler of a potential crime. Every detail of the investigation, every leak, every rumor, was dissected and amplified, fueling the public's hunger for understanding and accountability. The image of Michael Jackson, once a symbol of artistic brilliance, was now tragically intertwined with the grim reality of medical mismanagement and a potential criminal act. The global psychological state was one of collective grief and disbelief, coupled with an insatiable hunger for understanding and justice. For those involved in the investigation, it was a period of intense focus and pressure to uncover the truth, to piece together the final, tragic moments of a life that had ended far too soon. As the summer of 2009 waned and the autumn leaves began to turn, the world prepared for a final, public farewell to its fallen king. The atmosphere was bittersweet, a poignant blend of remembrance and the dawning reality of a legal reckoning. On July 7, a public memorial service for Michael Jackson was held at the Staples Center in Los Angeles, a venue that had once hosted his triumphs, now transformed into a somber shrine. The air inside was thick with collective emotion, a mixture of profound sadness and renewed appreciation for his unparalleled artistry. Millions watched globally as a constellation of stars, family members, and friends paid tribute. Smokey Robinson, Mariah Carey, Usher, and Shaheen Jafargholi each contributed to a moving tapestry of music and eulogy. But it was the raw, unscripted words of Michael's then 11-year-old daughter, Paris, that truly pierced the hearts of the world. Standing beside her brothers, Prince and Blanket, her voice trembling, she declared, "Daddy was the best father you could ever imagine." Her tearful testimony was a stark, heartbreaking reminder of the man behind the myth, the father who had simply wanted to be loved. The memorial was a cathartic experience for many, allowing fans to grieve collectively, to celebrate his enduring legacy, and to begin the difficult process of saying goodbye. In the wake of this emotional farewell, another significant event emerged: the release of This Is It in October 2009. Compiled from rehearsal footage captured in the final weeks of his life, the documentary film offered a ghostly, yet magnificent, glimpse into what the London concerts could have been. The atmosphere in cinemas worldwide was hushed, almost reverent, as audiences watched Michael, sometimes frail, sometimes vibrant, pour his remaining energy into his art. The film was a testament to his enduring vision, his perfectionism, and his undeniable stage presence, even in his declining health. It showed a man still capable of brilliance, a poignant what if that deepened the sense of loss. It became a bittersweet period of remembrance, allowing fans to connect with his artistry one last time, while simultaneously grappling with the dark circumstances of his demise. Simultaneously, the wheels of justice began to turn. In February 2010, Dr. Conrad Murray was formally charged with involuntary manslaughter. The initial legal proceedings were meticulous, slow, and highly publicized. The atmosphere shifted from collective grieving to a more focused, almost clinical, pursuit of accountability. The preliminary hearings laid bare the evidence, the propofol, the conflicting statements, the alarming lack of proper care. John Branca, Michael's longtime attorney and co-executor of his estate, worked tirelessly to protect his legacy and ensure justice for his family. For the Jackson family, particularly Katherine, who attended every session, it was a grueling process, a necessary step towards closure, yet one that forced them to relive the agony of their loss. The psychological state of the global audience was one of renewed appreciation for his genius, intertwined with a lingering sadness and a growing sense of anticipation for justice. The legal system was now setting the stage for a judicial confrontation, a quest to understand not just how Michael Jackson died, but why. The final act of this tragic drama unfolded in the Los Angeles courtroom in 2011. The trial of Dr. Conrad Murray for involuntary manslaughter became a global spectacle, a legal reckoning that captivated millions. The atmosphere in the courtroom was charged with an almost unbearable tension, a stark contrast to the reverent quiet of the memorial and the bittersweet nostalgia of, "This is it." This was raw, unvarnished reality, a meticulous dissection of Michael Jackson's final days. Day after day, the courtroom drama unfolded, broadcast live, dissected by pundits, devoured by a public still grappling with the loss of their icon. The evidence presented was damning. Detailed accounts of Murray's administration of propofol, the chaotic scene in Michael's bedroom, the frantic 911 call, and expert testimony condemning Murray's medical practices as grossly negligent. Prosecutors painted a picture of a doctor who prioritized his patients' demands for sleep over his safety, driven by a lucrative contract and a desperate desire to please. Witnesses took the stand, some tearful, some stoic. Kenny Ortega spoke of Michael's declining health and his concerns. Karen Faye described Michael's increasing fragility and his reliance on Murray. Randy Phillips and Paul Gongaware detailed their growing alarm over his missed rehearsals. The Jackson family, led by Catherine, sat in the front row, their faces a mask of grief and determination, seeking justice for their beloved son and brother. Murray, for his part, maintained a largely impassive demeanor, his silence often interpreted as defiance. On November 7, 2011, the verdict came down. After less than 9 hours of deliberation, the jury found Dr. Conrad Murray guilty of involuntary manslaughter. A collective gasp, followed by a wave of relief, swept through the courtroom and resonated across the globe. For many, it was a moment of judicial resolution, a tangible measure of accountability for Michael Jackson's untimely death. Murray's subsequent sentencing, 4 years in county jail, marked a legal finality to the direct circumstances of Michael Jackson's passing. Yet, for Michael Jackson's enduring legacy, it remains a complex and continually debated landscape. The atmosphere surrounding his memory is one of ongoing historical reflection, a mosaic of adoration, tragedy, and unanswered questions about the extreme pressures he faced throughout his extraordinary life. From 2011 to the present, Michael Jackson's music continues to resonate, his influence undeniable, his artistry celebrated by new generations. His children, Prince, Paris, and Blanket, now young adults, carry on his name, often speaking fondly of their father, striving to honor his memory. But the unresolved debates about his life and death persist. Was he a victim of his own choices, of a desperate pursuit of sleep, or a casualty of a predatory medical professional? Was he a tortured genius, driven to extremes by the suffocating embrace of fame, or a deeply flawed individual whose eccentricities ultimately led to his demise? The psychological state of fans and critics alike remains one of ongoing fascination, debate, and a profound sense of loss for a unique and troubled genius. His story serves as a cautionary tale about the perils of extreme fame, the fragility of the human psyche under relentless scrutiny, and the devastating consequences when trust is misplaced. Michael Jackson's secret, if there ever was one singular secret, was perhaps the unbearable weight of living a life that was never truly his own, a life constantly on display, constantly judged, and ultimately, tragically cut short. His music lives on, a vibrant, eternal testament to his genius, but his life, and the manner of his death, will forever remain a complex, poignant, and deeply human enigma.